good questions. There are 2 or 3 questions there, aren't there? Shall I start with the one about when did I start writing? I started writing when I was about the same age as you, because I started writing at school. I had a wonderful teacher called Miss Bow. And if you saw Miss Bow, you'd think she was a rather posh, rather straight lady with white hair, tight auburn curls, and she looked as if she'd be very strict. And though she was quite strict, she also had a great sense of humour, and she loved books, and she loved reading you stories, and she loved you writing stories for her. But she didn't call them stories in those days, long, long ago, because as you can see on the old guide, she used to call them compositions. And I used to love it when Miss Bow said, now it's time for us to do a composition, because I knew that meant writing a story. And she had a wonderful school library, which she kept in her classroom. I think she did that deliberately, so the kids in her class got the choice of all the best books. And I started writing, I think, with Miss Bow. Then I went on through secondary school. I still enjoyed writing. Then I went on to university, and I still enjoyed writing. I was doing English, so I was able to read all the books I wanted and write essays about them and so on. And then I became a teacher, and then I became a head teacher. And I miss teaching so much, I wrote my first book. It was called Daredevils or Scaredy Cats, and I wrote that in 1979, so I think that would be 36 years ago. Wow, I think that's right, 1979, something like that, yeah. And I've written now, I've got a new book, well, I've just had a new book come out just last month, a picture book. But I've got a new book coming out next year, probably in the spring, and it's 3 Shakespeare stories. I was asked by my publisher, in this case Oxford University Press, to write a story version of Twelfth Night, Julius Caesar, and The Winter's Tale, which are all great plays by Shakespeare. And they're written for kids a little bit older than you, but if you're good readers, you probably cope with them, so watch out for that one. And that will be, when it comes out, my 96th book. So I'm hoping to get to 100 if I possibly can. That would be really exciting. All right?
What has been your most exciting experience as an author?
What has been my most exciting experience as an author? Well, apart from the fun of writing the stories, you know, authors really love writing the stories. And I'm never happier than when I'm sitting down at my desk finding out what my next story is. Because you don't always know. You're feeling your way towards it. You have a kind of itch in the back of your brain and you have to kind of scratch it and out comes the story. But that's not very exciting. It's not in the sense of exciting for me, but it wouldn't be exciting for anybody else. I'm just sitting at a desk with a pencil, sitting at my keyboard. So I think probably the most exciting thing that happened to me as a writer, let me think. I think it was what turned out to be my 3rd or 4th book, when my phone rang one day and a voice at the other end said, "Hello, is that Chris Powling?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And the voice said, "This is Roald Dahl's book, and I wondered if you'd like to write it." I said, "Yes, please." And I actually had to spend 2 weekends staying with Roald Dahl. So I think in some ways, I bet you find that pretty exciting when you spend 2 weeks. I actually went into, have you ever read a book called Danny, the Champion of the World?
Yes.
You have. Do you remember the caravan that Danny and his dad sleep in half the story? I've actually been inside that caravan with Roald Dahl. It's actually on his front lawn. So, and it's a beautiful gypsy caravan, wonderful. So that was probably the most exciting thing as a writer. I mean, I've had other lovely things happen to me, like getting married, and like having my children, and like having my grandchildren. They're all very exciting. But I think the most exciting writing thing was getting to know Roald Dahl. Okay, who's next?
We have had many authors and illustrators visit Broadford, such as Anne Fine, Mike Spore, Jeremy Strong and Tom Banks. Do you get the opportunity to work with other authors?
Not so much writers. I do in fact know Anne Fine very, very well. She's an old friend. And who was the other one you mentioned? There were a couple of others. Jeremy Strong. I know Jeremy. I mean, in fact, I was at a conference. I spoke at a conference with Jeremy, I think in the autumn of last year, about a year ago. Was it? Maybe not quite as long as that. So I know Jeremy quite well too. You do get to meet other writers, yes. You tend not to get to work with them unless they're illustrators. Now, my books, I mean, I suppose 96 books, a lot of them have been illustrated because I write for primary age children. Mostly, not all the time, but mostly. And I got to know two illustrators very well indeed. One is called Alan Marks. Remember I mentioned the Shakespeare book, he did the pictures for the Shakespeare book. And a guy called Schuyler Anderson, where I did some very funny, I think they're funny, laughing books, I hope. So I got to know them very well indeed. And I must have done, 12 or 15 books with Alan, and probably about the same with Schuyler. So I've worked with them. But you tend not to work with other writers, or not on books anyway. You sometimes work in schools with them, or at conferences or whatever. But mostly I've worked with illustrators. Okay?
One of my favourite series of books are by footballer Frank Lampard, because I'm a huge football fan. What were your favourite books as a child?
I can think of two. One was a book you'll have all heard of. You may not have read it yet, but I think you've all heard of Treasure Island.
Yeah.
I thought it was terrific. Miss Bow, remember I mentioned Miss Bow, my first teacher, she said, Chris, I think you're ready for this book, because it was actually written actually, I think, for his stepson. When he got married, his wife had already been married before and she had a son. So it was written for his stepson when he was 12. And those were the days when Robert Louis Stevenson was alive, when kids read many more books even than they do today. So probably it was a bit difficult for me even then. She handed it to me when I was 10. And I understood half of it. But the bit that really impressed me was the half I didn't understand, because that felt grown up. And I kept having to go to Miss Bow and ask her, what does this mean and what does that mean? So one of them is Treasure Island. The other one was a book nobody will ever have heard of called On My Right. And it was a boxing story. And for some reason it fascinated me. You can never tell if a book's going to be your kind of book. You're sometimes surprised. But I used to borrow it from her school library. And I used, when I took it back, with Miss Bow, you kept a book for a week and then you had to put it back. She said, if you haven't read it in a week, it's probably not right for you. So, but I wanted to read it over and over again. So I used to hide it behind the other books. Because I didn't want, when my week was up with the next book, I didn't want to go back to get On My Right and find somebody else had borrowed it. So I reached behind the books, and I think Miss Bow knew exactly what I was doing, but she didn't stop me. She often said to me, I don't know why you like that book so much, Chris. And I said, I don't know either. Boxing. I mean, I was a little guy. I still am a little fella, as you can see. Certainly not a boxer, but it was something about that book. It's the story of a boy, a poor boy, didn't have much money. I didn't have much money when I grew up. And it's the story of how he became world champion boxer. So it was those two that fascinated me. But I was a reader, I was a reader, I was a reader, I was a reader. I read everything. But those are the two that stand out. But tell me, what's your favourite book?
One of the Percy Jackson books as well.
Tell me about it.
There's a film of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, and they do a book about it as well. And it's where one of the gods had a lightning bolt.
Yes.
And the lightning bolt gets stolen by the bad guy, and Percy Jackson and both of his friends need to try and get it back and give it back to the god.
Wow. Has it got pictures? Is it illustrated?
No.
It isn't. It's just writing. So you've got all the images or the ideas in your head? Have you what people look like and where the places are, where it all takes part and so on? You told me you like Frank Lampard's books. I have to tell you, I didn't know he'd written any children's books. But you like them, do you? And they're football stories, I guess, being Frank Lampard. Well, I hope one day I'll meet Frank Lampard at the publishing party. You never know. I certainly recognise him. Who did he play for? Because I think he said he played for one. I was going to say
and
one
then
club.
he's gone to another club in America.
That's right. That's in America now, because he's really in a way kind of retired, isn't he? But I'm not a fan of Chelsea much. Are you a fan of Chelsea?
No, I'm a fan of Arsenal.
Arsenal. You're a fan of Arsenal, but you're a fan also of Frank Lampard. That's a bit strange. Who's your favourite Arsenal player? Because I like Arsenal.
Alexis Sanchez.
You know my favourite club? The one I've been supporting for over 50 years. You promise you won't laugh if I tell you. Promise? You all promise. If I tell you which club it is, you won't laugh. Charlton Athletic. Don't laugh. What are you laughing at? They're not very good, I have to say. I mean, they were in the Premier League for about 10 years, but that's the most exciting I've seen them play. But the club, the ground, the valley, is only about a mile and a half from where I live. And it's all downhill, so I often walk to the ground, but if we've lost, it somehow seems a very long distance coming back. It's exactly the same, of course, except it's uphill. But if you've lost, have you found that when you go to a football match? You haven't. You never get upset when your team loses then. No. I'd like to say I don't, but I do. I say, oh, I don't care, but I do care, really. Are you supporting Arsenal now? Are you supporting Arsenal still now? Yep. Do you ever go and see them?
Yeah, I've been to the FA Cup final.
You've been to the FA Cup final? In fact, I've never done that. I've never done that. That's really exciting. Brilliant. I think we've still got some questions. So was that all of your questions? So that's fine. What's your questions?
Thank you for visiting our school today and for answering our questions. We look forward to reading some of the books you have created.